Qurban is a worship performed by Muslims as a form of devotion to Allah. The sacrifice of sacrifice involves the slaughter of certain animals with sincere intentions and following the procedures set out in the Islamic religion. The sacrificial service is carried out on the Eid al-Adha holiday, which falls on the 10th of Zulhijjah in the Hijriya calendar. The history of sacrifice in Islam has roots related to the story of the Prophet Abraham and his son, Prophet Ismail, as told in the Quran. This story is the historical basis for the sacrifice carried out by Muslims. According to the story in the Quran, Allah tested the loyalty of the Prophet Abraham by ordering him to sacrifice his son, Prophet Ismail. Prophet Abraham, who obeyed Allah, was willing to carry out this command. However, when Prophet Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son, Allah replaced him with a lamb as a sacrifice. This incident is an important event in the history of the Islamic religion, marking the submission of Prophet Abraham and Prophet Ismail to the will of Allah. The sacrifice of sacrifice in Islam is believed to be a form of respect and devotion that follows this example. After the advent of Islam and the spread of its teachings, the act of sacrifice became an important part of the rituals and traditions of the Islamic religion. The act of sacrifice was officially regulated during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who set the time and conditions for its implementation. The practice of sacrifice continues to be preserved and carried out by Muslims throughout the world to this day. Every year on Eid al-Adha, Muslims who are financially able to slaughter sacrificial animals as a form of worship, following the example of the submission and obedience of the Prophet Ibrahim. In addition to being a form of worship, sacrifice also has an important social and humanitarian dimension. The meat of the sacrifice is distributed to family, relatives, and people in need. This promotes togetherness, social awareness, and sharing of sustenance with others. The history of sacrifice in Islam involves the values of faith, sacrifice, submission, and social awareness. This act of worship continues to be an integral part of the religious and cultural practices of Muslims throughout the world. In Islam, sacrifice is not just the slaughter of animals, but a symbol of obedience, sincerity, and spiritual closeness to Allah. The word qurban itself comes from Arabic, which means to draw closer. This means that the essence of the sacrificial service is to taqarrub ilallah, to draw closer to Allah. Qurban is Allah's command conveyed through the law of the Prophet Muhammad and was exemplified by the Prophet Abraham in a major event when he was ordered to slaughter his son, Ismail. This command was a very tough test, but both of them obeyed completely because they believed and submitted to God's will. From that incident, Muslims were taught that obedience is the path to closeness to Allah, even when the command tests feelings and logic. Allah does not need the flesh or blood of sacrificial animals. What reaches Him is the intention and piety of the perpetrator. In the Quran, Allah says, "The flesh of the camel and its blood can never reach Allah, but it is your piety that reaches Him." This shows that what Allah assesses is the heart. Qurban is a spiritual practice to let go of ego, greed, and the world, and replace it with sincerity and submission to Him. Through Qurban, a Muslim feels a deep connection with the stories of the prophets, the values of sacrifice, and the awareness that everything in this world is just a trust. By slaughtering a qurban animal, a Muslim slaughters negative traits in himself, such as stinginess, excessive love of the world, and fear of loss. Qurban is an annual momentum that teaches that closeness to Allah does not come only through rituals, but through sacrifice, obedience, and sincerity. That is the deepest meaning of this worship. Qurban emulating the Prophet Abraham in patience and submission. The Qurban worship in Islam directly refers to the great story of the Prophet Abraham and his son, the Prophet Ismail. This story is immortalized in the Quran as a symbol of the peak of obedience, submission, and extraordinary faith in Allah. The story of fundamental sacrifice. The Prophet Abraham received an order in his dream to slaughter his beloved son, Ismail. A prophet's dream is a revelation, so he believed it was a direct order from Allah. Although emotionally heavy, the Prophet Abraham did not argue. He actually conveyed this to Ismail with gentleness. Ismail's response was extraordinary. He said, "O my father, do what you are commanded. God willing, you will find me among the patient." The obedience of these two servants of Allah shows the perfection of their faith and submission to His will. Example of firmness of faith and sacrifice, Qurban teaches Muslims to follow in the spiritual footsteps of the Prophet Abraham, namely, patience in facing life's trials, complete submission to God's will, even though it feels heavy, sincerity in making sacrifices to carry out divine commands. Allah replaced Ismail with a large slaughtered animal as a mercy, indicating that sincere intentions and true obedience are more valuable to Him than mere physical results. Qurban as a spiritual heritage. When a Muslim performs sacrifice, he is actually living out the noble values inherited from the Prophet Abraham. Letting go of ego and lust, choosing obedience over worldly love, making God the center of all life decisions. Sacrifice is not just a ritual slaughter, but rather a statement of deep faith that, like the Prophet Abraham, we are ready to obey God completely, even when it requires great sacrifice. Qurban, expression of gratitude for Allah's blessings. One of the spiritual meanings of Qurban worship is as a form of gratitude of a Muslim for all the blessings and gifts that Allah has bestowed in his life. Qurban is not only a material sacrifice, but also an expression of awareness and appreciation for the sustenance that has been received. Gratitude proven by deeds. Gratitude in Islam is not only expressed verbally, but must be proven through real actions. In this case, qurban becomes a form of charity that shows that the wealth that is owned is not personal property, but is a trust from Allah. The blessings are worthy to be shared and used in the path of goodness. By slaughtering qurban animals and distributing their meat to those in need, a Muslim is saying, "O Allah, I am grateful for your sustenance, and I want to share some of it as a sign of my gratitude." Qurban makes you aware of the source of all blessings. In modern life, humans are easily lulled by worldly achievements. Qurban becomes an annual moment that reminds us that all success and ease are gifts from Allah, not just the result of personal effort. A Muslim who is given ample sustenance and then chooses to make a sacrifice means that he realizes the source of his sustenance, avoids stinginess and arrogance, recognizes that true blessings are those accompanied by gratitude that brings blessings and peace. Allah promises in the Quran, "If you are grateful, I will surely increase you in blessings." Qurban is a form of gratitude that has the value of worship and has a social impact. The qurban meat that is shared strengthens solidarity between people, strengthens brotherhood, and makes happiness feel wider, not only for those who give, but also for those who receive. Qurban as an expression of gratitude is a combination of spiritual recognition and social action. A Muslim who makes a sacrifice means that he has recognized Allah's blessings, is grateful with full awareness, and practices it in a real form that benefits others. Qurban shares provisions and builds social concern. One of the important dimensions of Qurban worship is its social value. Islam not only encourages a good relationship between humans and their God, but also between humans and their fellow humans. Qurban becomes a concrete means to share sustenance, build solidarity, and bring happiness to people who rarely experience it. Meat distribution, symbol of equal distribution of blessings. Qurban meat is divided into 3 parts: 1/3 for oneself, 1/3 for family, relatives, and friends, 1/3 for the poor and needy. This division is not only technical, but contains the philosophy of justice and social empathy. People who are able are invited not to enjoy the blessings of sustenance alone, but to share it fairly and lovingly. Togetherness, brought to life through Qurban. For most of the poor, meat is a luxury food that can probably only be enjoyed once a year, namely during Eid al-Adha. So Qurban becomes a rare moment that brings smiles to their faces. Through this act of sharing, a sense of brotherhood is established among fellow Muslims. Awareness arises that true happiness is when we give, enlivening the spirit of brotherhood and mutual cooperation in society. Qurban as a form of sustenance that touches the heart. Sharing in Qurban is different from simply giving alms. Qurban is an act of worship, so what is shared is not only meat, but also love, empathy, and prayer. People who receive Qurban meat also feel that they are appreciated, not pitied. They remain part of a caring community. Qurban teaches that wealth is not to be hoarded, but to be planted into blessings. By sharing sustenance through Qurban, We not only lighten the burden of others, but also cleanse our hearts, strengthen social ties, and make society more just and caring. Qurban increases social and humanitarian concern. Qurban worship is not only about slaughtering animals, but also about growing sensitivity to the social conditions around us. It is a special moment in Islam that encourages Muslims to look deeper into the lives of others, especially those who live in poverty. Sharpening empathy through real action. When someone sets aside their wealth to buy a qurban animal, then witnesses firsthand how the meat is distributed to the poor, empathy grows naturally. This is a form of spiritual and social practice at the same time. Awareness that there are still many people in need. Opening eyes to real social inequality. Encouraging the emergence of further action beyond the moment of Eid al-Adha, Qurban as a gateway to wider concern. Although the essence of Qurban is sharing meat, the spirit behind it can be expanded to a larger social realm. Education encouraging Muslims who are able to send orphans and the poor to school, economy helping small businesses, local livestock breeders, or daily laborers to be independent and empowered. Thus, the value of Qurban does not stop at sharing meat, but can be a spark for long-term social movements. Turning rituals into social movements, Qurban teaches that care is not just an annual moment, but must become a culture. True worship is that which has an impact on others. Every Muslim has a social responsibility, not just a personal responsibility to Allah. Qurban is a bridge between spirituality and humanity. It forms a caring heart, a giving hand, and a mind that is open to seeing the suffering of others. From this ritual, a social awareness is born that can move real change in the lives of people. Qurban upholds the values of sincerity and sacrifice. Qurban in Islam is not just a ritual of slaughtering animals, but a deep spiritual practice. He taught two great values in the life of a Muslim: sincerity and sacrifice. Through sacrifice, a servant is tested, not on the size of the animal, but on the sincerity of his intentions and his willingness to obey Allah. Sincerity in worship without worldly selflessness, Qurban will only be accepted if it is based on sincerity. Allah does not look at the flesh or blood of animals, but looks at the contents of the heart of the person making the sacrifice. In the Quran, it is stated, "The flesh of camels and their blood cannot attain Allah's pleasure, but your piety can attain it." This shows that sacrifice is an inner charity, not just an outer appearance. A sincere person does not seek praise, does not show off his wealth, and does not compare his sacrifice with that of other people. He simply wants to please Allah. Sacrifice letting go of the beloved for the sake of Allah. In every Qurban, there is a real sacrifice, giving up possessions, choosing the best animal, and sacrificing something that is loved in order to obey Allah's command. This is the spiritual essence of the Prophet Abraham's story. He loved his son, but he loved Allah more. He was willing to sacrifice something that was most valuable because he believed in divine wisdom. Qurban invites Muslims to emulate this spirit in their daily lives. That love for Allah must be greater than love for possessions, position, even oneself. Strengthening the soul of submission and reliance by making Qurban, a Muslim learns to submit to the will of Allah, even when logic and emotion reject it, to let go of attachment to the world, because everything that is owned essentially belongs to Allah, to become a soul that is ready to be tested, as the Prophet Abraham and Ismail were Qurban, is a symbol of unconditional sincerity and limitless sacrifice. It forms a human being who is not only obedient in appearance, but also willing in spirit, ready to give the best to Allah, even if it means letting go of something that is very much loved. Qurban worship is not just slaughtering animals on Eid al-Adha, but a form of worship that is full of spiritual, social, and humanitarian meaning. Qurban is a means of getting closer to Allah with full sincerity and obedience, as exemplified by the Prophet Ibrahim, who was willing to sacrifice his son to fulfill God's command. Through Qurban, Muslims learn to emulate patience, submission, and extraordinary faith, while also expressing gratitude for all the blessings that Allah has given. Not only that, Qurban is also a medium for sharing sustenance with others, strengthening social awareness, and fostering a sense of brotherhood in society. True story, friends. See you in the next video.